Welcome to the Navigating Dental Insurance Podcast, where we don't take from insurance companies. Here are your hosts, Mr. Jordan Comstock and Mr. Ben Tuine.
Hello there, everybody. This is Ben Tuine. Welcome to the Navigating Dental Insurance Podcast. I'm your solo host today, Jordan Comstock, who normally co-hosts with me, is unavailable for this particular episode. But it's still great to be with you. It's great to chat with you. It seems like in this day and age, the webinars and the podcasts are becoming popular. And I've been receiving feedback from our listeners on what they want to hear and certain topics as it pertains to insurance or non-insurance topics that they want to dive into. And today is one of those topics. We're gonna dive into a little bit about some case presentation with our guests. Who I'd like to introduce right now. His name is Craig McVey. He's been in dentistry practicing as a consultant for over 15 years, works with practices all over the country, has an MBA, and he's just phenomenal when it comes to understanding the business of dentistry and then coaching on several different components on how to be successful as a business operator. The great thing about Craig is I also work with a lot of his clients. And we try to maintain long-term relationships with our clients. You know, we're in it for the long haul with them. And that's the pattern that we see with Craig, is that his clients are long-term clients. And I think that should speak to his ability, you know, his performance as a practice coach or a practice consultant, simply because, you know, oftentimes when you get clients, they stick around with you for a year and then they don't renew, you know. And that might be for a variety of reasons. In my mind, the non-renewals are likely because of the low performance on the coaching side of things. But Craig's business model is designed to maintain a long-term client, and we definitely see that with the mutual clients that we have with him. So Craig, welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, it's great. And so I'd like to always ask this introductory question, just so our listeners get to know you a little bit more, is how did you stumble into dentistry? I say stumble because I stumbled into dentistry by accident.
I'll try to keep this short. I got my MBA out in Hawaii, and my son's godfather is a plastic surgeon. And they were always, you know, stressed out about the business aspect of their practice, successful practice. And my wife at that time, when we moved back to the mainland, just said, you know, you ought to look for something where you can consult, because I love teaching. I spent many years in Cutco Cutlery. I actually opened their operations in Hawaii starting in 1991 and grew from one office to offices on 4 different islands. So I enjoyed the presentation aspect, and really with their training with vector marketing was huge business acumen with them. So simply, Ben, one night I just got on the computer and I found a opening at Levin Group, which at that time I didn't know was the largest dental consulting company. And I got a call the next day and literally got hired. And within 2 weeks I was there. That was it. So I had to learn from scratch. But, you know, having the business acumen and education was probably the most important thing.
That's awesome. You know, you mentioned one thing here that kind of caught my attention that's kind of off topic, is I didn't know that you, did you go to Manoa?
No, I wasn't. I went to high school and college in the mainland in California. My mom is from Hawaii.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
She grew up in Wahiawa, and she was a Lelehua mule, and yeah, she did go to UH in Manoa and studied a little bit of business there. So I was always very close with her side of the family, and decided I needed a change, and Cutco was looking for someone to start something in the islands. That's what took me over.
That's awesome. That explains your emails when you open them with aloha, you know.
Yes.
So you're a true Hawaiian brother then. So my mom's from the Big Island, from Hilo. And we don't go back often to the Big Island. We went earlier this year, and I got to tell you, man, there's something about, you know, being Polynesian and going back to the islands and now viewing it from the perspective of a tourism experience, you know, not as a local, but going back home, you know, the islands, like, they just call you, you know, like, come home, you know, haere mai, you know, and all that fun stuff. So I'm so thrilled to hear that you also have those ties to Hawaii. I actually almost went to Manoa, University of Hawaii. I was recruited on a scholarship to play football, but I ended up signing with University of Arizona, and that's where you're at right now, right? In Tucson?
Oh, yeah, they're on TV all the time getting ready. I think we have a home game this weekend.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, that's really cool. Really cool. Well, awesome. So you work with the Levin Group, and of course you've worked with some other groups now, but today you're independent, right? You have your own firm.
Correct.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, and really through the last 7 years working at Quantum Leap Success in Dentistry, who was founded by Dr. Mike Kessner, who has, he wrote a book out there that was, I think the third edition came out in 2012 on having $1 million practice. He was really my mentor in terms of, how dentistry has changed in the last, I would say 7 to 8 years, and especially the philosophies that he had in terms of light case presentation like we're talking about today. He has 14 of his own practices, built them from scratch basically, and is highly, highly successful. And so I'm lucky that I do get to carry on his philosophies. I talk to Dr. Kessler quite a bit, and I get to carry on his philosophies that bottom line, Ben, they just work. It's very, very simple. I like simple. And when you're dealing with a business model like dentistry, which to me, is an upside down business model, meaning, it's the business owners that are working and the providers that are working with the customers. It's not like a business owner that has a bunch of customer service reps that work like in a retail environment, or I use the analogy of like an auto parts store, right? They don't have the time hardly to really spend time on the business. So keeping things simple is the best approach, in my opinion.
I like that. I agree. Sometimes we overcomplicate things and overanalyze and overassess and have all these different spreadsheets that really serve no purpose, or may be too aggressive.
It doesn't get any action.
Right. Yeah.
Implementation. It's like, the whole concept, which is a true concept of lag measures and lead measures. Looking at lag measures all day doesn't really do anything to move a needle or a lever. So
yeah, absolutely. There's a restaurant out in I think France. Interestingly, all they sell are tomahawk ribeyes. That's the only thing they sell.
Wow.
And they don't use any fancy seasonings. It's just salt and pepper. The interesting thing about it is that, and I learned about this particular restaurant from the perspective of how to keep things simple in a business, And I'm sure that you probably have some ways to liken this into case presentation as well, which we'll dive into here in a minute. But I love that fact that people go to this restaurant because it's known for these gigantic, awesome tomahawk ribeyes, and they don't serve any sauces or anything. They put it on the grill, and then they just serve it up with the bone and all that. And you can't order it rare, medium rare, or medium well. They cook it the way they cook it, and you eat it the way they cook it, and it's consistent every single time. And it's a little bit between rare and medium rare, and that's sort of the type of customers that they draw. But the interesting thing is that they are always sold out. A simple business model. They serve a piece of steak, a very big piece of steak, and the only seasonings are salt and pepper, and that's it. And yet they're sold out. You have people from all over the world that go there, and sometimes I think, gosh, I can do a ribeye in my backyard. I can do a tomahawk. But a lot of people say that, the steak expert, people that grill for a living, they say that when you go to this place, there's something about it, just the simplicity about their menu, that makes it a wonderful experience. And I don't know what it is because I haven't been there yet. When I think about that from a business perspective, keeping things simple,
yes,
oftentimes when you keep things simple, you cut out a lot of the unnecessary headaches about business operation, in the sense where you can focus on a lot of things and not be overly stressed because you have a simple operation that's very, very successful. I want to kind of dive into the case presentation components and briefly, well, I just want to ask you, the case presentation is one where you see a lot of articles about it, a lot of different perspectives on case presentation. And yet it seems to be one of those areas, at least from my experience, that is very, very much lacking in many dental practices across the United States. Why do you think that is? Where it's a topic that is widely known, and there's always a case presentation lecture at every dental convention. In fact, multiple case presentation lectures. And yet this is a huge area where practices suffer. What's your take on that, and why do we suffer with this?
It's probably because, or my opinion is, Ben, that in order to move to a model that works, because the old models simply don't work. Overeducating patients on dental treatment doesn't work. There's no data that says that works. And that's the old model. The old model is educate, educate, educate. And let's say we're talking about a single unit crown, educate, talk about the crown, talk about build up, all of these things. And then their quote unquote dental IQ will be increased, and that would help them to make a decision. Mm-hmm. That's simply not the case anymore. So the challenge, getting back to your question, is moving from that old model to one that actually really works takes a change of behavior. And changing behavior is much, much harder than any other type of change. Brian Tracy says 95% of what we do in our everyday life is habit. Mm-hmm. It's hard to change habits, and so imagine that now as I teach a model, where it's talking about treatment acceptance as a team activity. It's not the doctor's activity. It's like the treatment coordinator's activity. It's a team activity. So now you have more moving parts, if you will, to change behavior. And that's what has to change. So it also takes time. It takes practice. It takes role playing. It takes an understanding of understanding why these behaviors actually encourage patients to say yes to treatment.
Yeah. I like that. So changing behavior, it's kind of like, at least the way I view that, as a Polynesian guy that has, I've been through bouts of struggles with my weight. Right now I'm sitting comfortably, back to regular exercise regimen, which I used to do when I was in college. Kind of got away with that when I got married. I moved away from that when I got married. But, I think it's just human nature. I enjoy food, and I struggled with it over the years. It took me 10 years of going through maybe 100 different diets. The diets, you do the diets, and then they don't work because you gain that weight back, right? What I learned is that the changing of behavior to me is sort of like a change in lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And funny thing, Craig, is that what works for me is actually eating Polynesian food.
Nice.
The greasy luau, the Kalua pig and all that. Wow. And very similar to what people view as a keto diet. To me, it's just the high fat content, high protein, and some carbs, very little carbs, combined with a regimen of exercise. And in the last couple of years, boom, dropped 100 pounds.
Oh, wow. And
I've kept it off.
Good.
And it all goes back to this change in behavior. For me, it was a change in lifestyle that I could live with, Can you speak to this sort of change of behavior in terms of case presentation? So we're getting out of the old over-educating, and it sounds like to me we're going back to the theme of simplifying things, right?
Absolutely.
Can you go through the process? Like, what do you need to view? Like, what are some of the simple things that you need to look out for when you're going from the old model and shifting to a more simple model of case presentation, more effective model, I should say?
Well, yeah, I mean, as a consultant or a coach, we have a huge advantage over dental teams because we do spend a lot of time in dental offices and observe. And I love observing because I put myself in the shoes of the patients, and I can see how they react to a hygienist or to a doctor or even to a front desk. And over the years, you start seeing, and Ben, you travel, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing with traveling. And passengers aren't the same passengers they used to be, right? It's like in all of these different areas that you see. But when we're going back to a dental practice, it's you see behaviors in patients that change. First thing off, first of all, I always say, patients' attention span is so limited.
Mm-hmm.
They don't pay attention. Why? It's not because they're being rude. It's because they have all these other things going on. You have the onset of the old cell phone, right? Let's talk about a smartphone. That takes away from our attention because we feel we have to be available to that or tied to it every single day.
Right.
People, they've got a lot of things going on. A lot of times they're overscheduled. So when we go back to things like, educating and educating patients, the reality is less is more. Less is more. So diving into some of the key aspects of it is, number one, the best tool, in my opinion, to get patients to say yes to treatment is an intraoral photo or an intraoral camera.
Mm-hmm.
They need to see what a hygienist or doctor is looking at, and it can't be achieved with a mirror. So by doing this, it actually gets them involved in this treatment diagnosis process or in the treatment acceptance process. They can see it. You don't really have to say too much to a patient about a molar that has a lot of decay or has cracks all the way around it. You don't really have to say much when they have a picture sitting right in front of them.
Right. That's the evidence.
That's it. And I can relate a real quick story is that I took in my car when I used to live up in Phoenix and for an oil change, and I get a call from the guy saying, hey, look, I want to show you a picture. And he texts me a picture of one of my front tires, and on the inside you can see kind of some thread coming through. And he said, look, you need new tires. Well, I did get new tires, but if he never showed me that picture and he just called me and said, hey, you need new tires, chances are I'm like, well, I don't think so. I don't even see anything, right? I didn't see anything when I'm driving. So intraoral camera is one of the key things, is because, like I said before, you don't really have to say much. Mm-hmm. What you say is important, though. Okay, what you say is important. So let me go on to another philosophy of Dr. Mike Kestner, and that is, besides less is more, and not overeducating, is the doctor being the quote-unquote second opinion. So if a patient generally will spend more time with their hygienist than they will a doctor throughout their life at a dental office. Mm-hmm. So the trust factor and rapport is generally built with a hygienist. If a hygienist is doing a prophy and they go through and they're doing a good compulsory, look around the mouth and so forth, and then the doctor comes in and does this exam, the doctor starts bringing up all of these indications. Mm-hmm. Okay? Some patients might think, well, my hygienist was just in there. I see her all the time. How come she didn't say anything?
Right.
Okay. So our model is if a hygienist does that routine, compulsory look around with a camera and starts taking pictures of areas of concern. Mm-hmm. And before the doctor come in, they sit that patient up and say, look, I want to show you some pictures and I'm concerned about these areas. Then when the doctor comes in and maybe confirms it's a crown or it's a filling, the patient at that point is pretty much agreeing because, hey, the hygienist saw it. Now the doctor sees it, so it must be real.
Yeah.
Okay. And that takes a lot of pressure off the doctor. So that's kind of the doctor's a second opinion. It's not that the hygienist is diagnosing. It's like anything else. Okay. It's fun to see a patient who's never had intraoral pictures because usually the first thing they say is, I don't want to see it. However, once they do see it, you've created an experience for them that is something that needs to be maintained because they're going to expect it the next time. So that's kind of, again, doctor being the second opinion. Now, what does that do? Well, when we're handing off to the doctors and say, hey, doc, I just talked to Mrs. Jones about this. Let me show you this picture. Then it honestly saves the doctor a lot of time in the exam. Mm-hmm. They can start off with that indication and then go ahead and finish their exam, right? But again, that's why we talk about a team activity. It's not the doctor generally. It's not the treatment coordinator.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think, from a polling standpoint, the Gallup polling, every year they put out the most trusted professionals in the United States. And they do this for every country. Interestingly, in New Zealand, dentists are ranked number 1 as the most trusted professional. Here in the United States, the most trusted professional, according to Gallup, are nurses.
Okay.
And in that article, hygienists actually fall in that category. They're viewed in the same light as a nurse from the patient's perspective. The dentists in the United States are ranked 5th, so still pretty high. But that really fits with what you're teaching here, and what you're saying is that when the doctor comes in and sort of is a second opinion, and the hygienist actually, pointed out that there's an issue here, and the doctor will be able to take a look at it further. I actually work with a lot of clients that have mentioned to me that method actually really works. The visual component with the intraoral cameras, but just the simple aspect of having tag teaming with the hygienist to help create that trust with the patient, in the sense that what's going to be what the doctor is going to see and at that point diagnose is real.
Yeah.
So that's the part that takes time, because this is something that's not done in most of the dental practices across the country, right? It's
getting more and more prevalent.
Yeah.
Okay? It's more and more prevalent, and they say they take pictures. I mean, what I tell hygienists is you take pictures with every and all patients that sit in your chair. Mm-hmm. And the comments I get sometime, and I'm going to actually go as far as say pushback sometimes, is, well, I have patients come in and their oral health is great, and there's nothing to take pictures of. Right. I said, well, you want to take a picture of what you just told me. Okay? Take a picture of how great their home care is, mm-hmm. right? Praise them. Tell them this is the reason why you come see me every 6 months, so we maintain this. Mm-hmm. That way it does two things. One, they'll for sure keep coming back. Okay. And two, it keeps them in that behavioral change or that habit of taking pictures. Because what I've seen over the long term, if they start picking and choosing who they're going to take pictures on, eventually they stop taking pictures over time.
Yeah. Funny thing is I actually take pictures of my son's teeth. He was eating Oreos. I think this was like a few years back. He was eating Oreos. And I, sent him to the bathroom, go brush your teeth. And I knew that his teeth were going to come back and there were going to be some Oreo stains in there. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach him the reason why he needs to brush his teeth. So he comes back and I snap a bunch of photos. And I said, did you do a good job? He's like, no. Well, yeah. He always says, yeah, Most of the days, like, I brush my teeth, and I look, and there's all kinds of plaque. Like, no, you didn't. So I'm having this constant debate with my now 10-year-old about brushing teeth.
Okay.
A few years back, I'm like, I'm going to get him. I'm going to trick him into the reason why he needs to brush his teeth. So he had Oreos, brushed his teeth, came back. I snapped a bunch of photos, and sure enough, there were these black spots that looked like cavities.
Wow.
And I showed it to him, and I said, look, you're developing cavities. Now I'm going to have to take you to the dentist to get those fixed. He starts bawling. He's like, no, because he's on the no cavity at the dentist. He's for his age, he's one of very few that has no cavities. So he starts bawling, and he goes back to the bathroom, and he brushes and brushes and brushes. And sure enough, he gets all the Oreos out. But that was a little trick I used on him a few years ago, and he doesn't really miss brushing his teeth a whole lot now. And from time to time, I'll take photos of his teeth just to sort of show him, like, look, this might be an area of concern, that you need to focus on. But I don't know what it is, but it's just the psychological for him. It's like, he's like, I need to make sure my teeth are perfect. And I can't afford to have a cavity, so I need to make sure that I brush every single day. I used to brush his teeth up until he was age 8. Wow. And then I was like, at that point, I was like, he brushes his teeth, and then I'll kind of follow up here and there. But now he's doing it 100% on his own. But when you take that simple concept and apply it to adults, it seems to have the same effect, right?
Sure.
For me, tricking my son into it, but for patients, not necessarily tricking them, but using some visual techniques in an effort to get them to stay committed, but also to commit to treatment that they can visibly see.
Yeah, and it builds trust. That's the other thing. It's being straightforward and transparent about treatment needs is important, and that doesn't take long to convey that. Talking with one of my clients in Parkwood, Colorado, who actually takes the time to use the intraoral photo to do before and after on restorative treatment, to build trust, or when he would say, pop off an amalgam, he would take a picture and show them what's going on under there. and so that they trust that what he is saying or has said before is really true. And so the camera is an amazing tool. It's an amazing tool. And that is something that if it's incorporated will help quite a bit. Okay.
Yeah. I like this because when you have that visual evidence, at that point, when you're submitting to insurance and the claims get denied, you have a much easier time explaining to the patient that, well, this wasn't what they call auto-adjudicated claim. It really didn't go through the hands of a clinical professional. Let's just resubmit it because we have the evidence to indicate that the treatment was necessary, medically necessary according to your benefits. So I have a lot of clients that do indicate that the cameras, not only from a case presentation standpoint, but it really does help make the insurance company look bad when they deny claims and there's sufficient evidence. They deny claim, they say that, well, this doesn't fit our criteria for coverage. I'm like, seriously? We actually have a photo to back up the fact that there's a crack in the tooth right there, and you're saying that there's no crack. Or you're saying as an insurance company that another restoration like an onlay or a filling would be more appropriate. Things like that help you retain that trust with the patient, saying, well, the insurance company doesn't really know what they're talking about, probably because it was auto-adjudicated. We'll resubmit it again just so that they know that here's the evidence that they ignored the first time around. I bring this up because in this day and age, Craig, so many insurance companies are throwing dentists under the bus, trying to pit them against their patients in the sense of putting distrust between the patient and the dentist, at least making the patient distrust their dentist. So the skills and the process in which you described has a direct impact on how we deal with insurance, from a clinical perspective. In this case, a claims denial perspective, that a lot of practices are seeing. In terms of case presentation, do you know, and I don't know the answer to this, I'm just curious, what is the national average of case acceptance?
It varies. I mean, if you talk with, like Dr. Kessner, his experience, and ours too, when we go into practices, say back, a few years ago, number one thing is they really don't know. Most practices don't track case acceptance at all. At least don't track to a point where it's accurate. They may track it by dollars. They may say, hey, we presented $150,000 in treatment and $100,000 of that was accepted. So we're at whatever that is, 75%. Or whatever, 50%, whatever it is. Anyway, but they're only tracking dollars. Okay. So if you ask Dr. Kessner, the experience of our company working with him was, it's generally between anywhere like 20 or 30%. But what does that mean? Right? That's the thing. Case acceptance. And I'm glad you brought up tracking because, in order for practices to understand that they need to make a change, they have to look at the opportunities that they're missing. Okay. So I have my clients track case acceptance separately, and they track it, and I look at three basic numbers. One is they write down every treatment plan that they have, how much was presented, how much was accepted. So there's a percentage that says, okay, out of, let's say 100 treatment plans, if 50 of them were accepted in whole or in part, meaning the patient scheduled an appointment, then their treatment plan acceptance is 50%.
Gotcha.
Right? Another tally on there, another number I look at is if you add up all of the treatment plans and divide it by the total number that was presented, what's the average size in dollars of that treatment plan that's presented? And you can also do that with what's accepted. Okay? Right. Because that kind of gets back to another area we want to look at, and that is we don't really see a lot of success in these huge treatment plans, 10,000, 12,000, 8,000, especially for new patients. If we take another approach and look at, okay, what's the priority? I know we have other things to do, but we focus on the priority first, and then let's take care of these other things. Patients are more apt to say, okay, yeah, I want to do that, But if we don't have the data, if we don't track simple data, then we don't know where we are. That's where we're missing the opportunity. Now, where should practices be? They should be between 75 and 85%.
That was my follow-up question. That's perfect.
And it can be done. And it's like, I'm going to go back to this is my unofficial poll, Ben. I do this with every hygienist that I meet, every new hygienist. I will ask them in a group setting. So we usually do a sit-down training initially. I'll ask them, okay, out of all the patients that come and sit in your chair, new patient recall, right? How many out of 10, in your opinion, need some kind of dental treatment? And the average I always get to, some people say 8 or 9, some people will say 6 or 7, but the average is generally 7. Okay, I can narrow it down 7. So if 7 out of 10 patients that the hygienists see need some kind of dental treatment, and that could be from perio to restorative, right?
Right.
Then realistically speaking, 7 out of 10 patients should be getting some kind of treatment.
Right.
But it's not 2 out of 10. It's not 3 out of 10, right? So that's an eye opener, because if the staff hears that, wow, you mean 7 out of 10 people that sit in your chair, hygienist, need treatment. That's a lot of opportunity, especially if they're only at 20 or 30% in actual treatment plan acceptance.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, when I started in dentistry, this was a major issue. We had at one of our locations alone, big practice. We had I think 16 operatories, and we started to look at the numbers. There was a lot of production. The production was, for the most part, anywhere between, treatment plans that were being presented to patients. Every month it consistently hit between $650,000 and $700,000. But the revenue for this group on a monthly basis was around $200,000. So we identified a need. Like there's there's a lot of treatment walking out the door and never coming back in.
Sure.
So these are some of the things that we focused on. We actually hired a business banker and brought in some really good presentation skills, and he adhered to the simple component of treatment, just the high level of things. And we didn't implement everything that you're talking about today, which I wish rewinding the clock, I wish we did. I wish we bought an intraoral camera. I wish we had that tag team between the hygienist and the dentist. But we were able to raise to more than double the revenue for that group every single month. Just all we did was brought in somebody that was really good at presenting. Yep. And he kept the presentations very simple to the extent where patients had trust, And then the key thing with what you said, the big treatment plans, we had a financing plan for them, an in-house financing program to where, in the business banker's mindset, he's like, people would be more than happy to pay monthly payments than see a $15,000 bill and think that they have to pay all this today. People eat in smaller chunks, and that really helped in terms of, as an eye opener on so many different aspects of, there's so much treatment that patients need, but they're not coming back in. And who knows if they're going to other practices to get that done,
And statistics say they will.
Yeah.
Because, especially general dentistry, it's needs-based, right? And so, part of this model, what I really love about this model that I teach is that we're not selling dentistry. Okay. What we're doing is we're bringing up a need. And a lot of times we're going to bring that up in a priority order. We're going to show you. Now, probably the biggest component that's one of the hardest behavioral changes is when we're talking about need is, how do we, everything that we do as consumers when we purchase something is all based on value and price.
Right.
Everything from a candy bar to a house, right, is we will weigh out the value and price. So when it comes to building value with patients in regards to treatment, it's not about education, because then you'll lose them, right? You'll confuse them. And if people are confused, they don't buy or they don't make a purchasing decision. Building value is, what's valuable to them. It's kind of like with that car tire I was telling you about. It's valuable to me. At that time, I was dating my now wife, driving between Gilbert and Tucson, which is about, 90 miles. Yeah, it's valuable to me to have new tires. I don't want to get a blowout driving to Tucson. So one of the things we teach and again, this is another thing that has to be that behavioral process is when we're talking with patients and we're showing them an issue or a problem. Okay. We're really, hygienists and dental staff, especially clinically, they're good at talking about the problem, showing the problem. They're also good at the solution. Okay. What they need to add to their repertoire is the urgency on why this needs to be done. Okay. And this is another big area to create this urgency. So what is urgency? Okay. Our definition, or my definition of urgency, is communicating to the patient the consequences of non-treatment.
Right.
What's going to happen if we don't take care of this molar that has cracks on 4 sides? Because in dentistry, clinically speaking, any kind of, they don't get indications like cracks indicate, don't get better over time. They simply don't. It's not a bruise. It's not a broken bone. And if we're conveying to them, hey, I don't want this to get worse, or this tooth, you see these areas here pointing to a picture, these are cracks, and that tooth is going to break. And I know that Dr. Jones is going to want to do something to either help save that tooth or make sure that doesn't happen now.
Right.
Okay? And so it's nice that we're able to show a picture and talk honestly that, hey, we care about you and we need to get this done, right? And feel honest and straightforward with patients, right? And not everybody's going to accept treatment, Ben. I mean, that's just the way it is. You have people who wait, but you know what? If they're coming to their 6-month appointments, we'll see them on a limited exam at some point for that same, right, for that same indication, But that's a part too, is that creating that urgency, consequences of non-treatment, again, we have found is one of the best ways, along with a photo, to get patients to say, you know what, you're right. I should probably get that done.
That's awesome. There's a friend of mine up here in Salt Lake City, and I'm mentioning this. I don't recommend, at least, I'm only mentioning this just for giggles and kicks, not as a recommended phrase to use with patients. So he says, whenever a patient says, so what if I do nothing? The dentist, he pauses and he looks at the patient and he says, well, do you want to die? Even if it's just a filling, he's like, well, do you want to die? And then he pauses and waits, to see the patient's reaction. And the patient's like, seriously, I could die from this? He's like, no, just kidding. But he says that just in an effort to disarm the patient, to have a little bit of chuckle. But for him, it works. But he also goes into exactly what you mentioned, the urgency, in the sense of, well, you may not die, but there are risk factors, that, and then he goes into just the clinical risk factors. His case acceptance, based upon the metrics the tracking metrics that you've gone over, is above 90%. He gets the vast majority, and he does all on 4s. He does multiple implant cases. He's actually one of the implant firms here in Utah that's probably more well known. But there's a lot of merit to what you're going through, Craig. And I think a lot of dentists might feel a little bit overwhelmed in terms of where to start. So we could sit here and talk about this all day long and provide detailed information, which of course, to respect your time, we don't want to do that. We want to make sure.
Yeah, there's a lot more aspects to it. I mean, the best way we have found to get something like this kicked off is especially when we get new clients, is we go in and just train. We just go in and do a 4 to 5 hour workshop that covers not only these steps I'm talking about, but really the why behind all of these different things. Again, it is a paradigm shift. It is hugely a paradigm shift. Where, again, before, hey, let's do an hour comprehensive exam, right? Where Dr. Keshner talks about when he was back starting doing 90-minute comprehensive exam to build the trust. When now we see a tremendous amount of success with new patients coming through hygiene, the doctor may spend 10 minutes with them in a comprehensive exam, because it's the whole team activity that builds that trust and that rapport, so it's highly efficient, and the results speak for themselves. I mean, I had a client who I still keep in touch with, probably one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And his wife was kind of the part-time office manager in Las Vegas. And they were doing about 560, 570 collections a year. And really, he really focused on the case presentation method. Didn't change his hours, didn't change his staff. And within 18 months was $1 million practice. And it wasn't a huge boost in new patients. It was simply they made the decision. And he made the decision, I'm just going to do what you folks tell me to do. And that's what they did. And now they've maintained that $1 million practice status since then. And that to me is one of the best examples of just taking it seriously and grasping it. And what did it cost them? I mean, really, they didn't have to add staff, didn't have to add days, and nearly doubled their practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So folks, there's a component to this how it ties into insurance a little bit more. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to cut a separate episode to talk about how case presentation, when you master this concept, how it impacts practices from an insurance participation perspective. But for the time being, I don't want to take the focus on Craig with this particular topic. We'll speak about that on maybe perhaps even the next episode. But for those of you that might want to get a hold of Craig, what's the best way for people to reach out to you directly for any additional questions, or if anybody wants to retain you?
Yeah, my email address is probably the best way. My company is called CTM Dental Consulting. My email address is very simply C like in Craig, T like in Tom, M like in Mike, Dent, DENT @gmail.com. And I am open to, chatting with anybody, any kind of advice I can give. Obviously, if there was some training that want to be set up, what's nice about working for myself, I can be as flexible as possible. But I talk to, dentists all over the country, and I actually had been one time, I actually had clients in Hong Kong and Shanghai.
Oh, wow.
American board certified orthodontist out there for a couple of years. That was very cool. And I'll just say a dental office is a dental office. Yeah. No matter where you are around the world. So, but I had a lot of clients in Hawaii just because I was kind of from Hawaii. So,
yeah. But
if you have any questions, it is a process, but it's definitely something that it really doesn't cost an investment for a practice. These again are changes in behaviors that are basically going to take, what are you doing now? If there's one thing you can change your practice to make you more profitable without investing really in not much money at all, this is one of the things that can completely transform a practice. And that's why it's our my cornerstone of consulting is because I still go back and review this with all of my clients constantly.
Well, this is just perfect, Craig. Really appreciate your time today and sharing this information. For those of you that are listening, we'll post Craig's contact information in the show notes for you to just click down on that drop menu to see Craig's email address, where you can email him directly if you have additional questions or if you want to chat with him directly. I highly recommend Craig. We work with a lot of his clients, and what he's talking about today is definitely things that we do see in action in those practices. And for the most part, those are very, very successful practices. Craig, thank you so much for your time today, buddy. It's always great chatting with you, and I really appreciate it. I wrote a lot of notes in an effort to mine some questions, but I wrote notes because these were new things that I haven't heard before, a lot of them, that are helping, at least for me, to build my knowledge base around this topic as just an observer of what goes on in dental practices. Craig, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, no. Thank you, Ben. I mean, I've enjoyed working with you for years, and what you do and help my clients. I'm not an insurance expert like you, and so it's great having resources like you. And love the podcast, and just love chatting with you about this. And I'm in this to help clients. I love what I do. Been doing it a long time, and watching clients become successful and just like you, I'm sure, when they start seeing light at the end of the tunnel and really making changes. That's exciting. It's really exciting.
It really is.
I appreciate you, Ben. I appreciate you having me on.
It's been my pleasure, Craig, and to our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until the next time, I wish everybody the best of success and a great day today. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Craig.
You're welcome. Thanks, Ben.